Back in the 1960s, African American and European American people were in the streets, on the buses, at the water fountains, and Martin Luther King Jr. was in jail, challenging the rest of us as to why we were not there. Many of us were. Recently, I was having a conversation with an African American friend of mine who said that, in his opinion, African Americans have lost their dream. They've given up. They're sitting on the porches, collecting welfare, preferring to do that instead of the things that they had done in the past. Okay, I listened to him and I thought about that for a while. And I wondered where he got that and why he felt that way. And if that was the way he saw it, because this is an educated man we're talking about. I wasn't sure how to approach that idea, that topic, what the meaning of it was. We know that in spite of the fact that all of the things in the 60s and all of the things in the 1860s and all of the things in the 1760s, in spite of the struggle that's been going on this continent between African American people and the authority, whatever that authority was at any given point, we know that in spite of all that struggle, what we have right now in the United States is a situation where African American men are 4 times more likely to be unemployed than European American men at every educational level. That an African American man with a bachelor's degree is likely to average somewhere in the vicinity of the same salary that he would be making if he was a European American man with a high school diploma. We know that European American men with a felony conviction for cocaine dealing will be hired before an African American man with no such felony on his resume. We know that in 2001, they determined that 1 out of 3 of the African American boy babies born in that year would probably wind up in prison. The Bureau of Labor Statistics now tell us in 2010 that the overall U.S. unemployment rate is 10%, and we're all aghast. We're horrified by this. But if you break the statistics down by race, you find out that European American unemployment statistics are about 9%. Latino statistics on unemployment range about 13%. And African Americans are running 16%. If you include the invisible unemployed, those people who are part-time employed when they need a full-time job, including also those people who have just given up looking for a job, they've been turned down so many times, they've just gone home. If you include those people, you've got a whopping 28% of the African American working public unemployed right now. That's 1 out of 4. African American teens, 16 to 19 years old, have been estimated at being unemployed at a rate of about 3 out of 4. That means 3 out of 4 people who could be working are not. It's an estimation, but it's a powerful, powerful figure. So that means that 19-year-old guys coming out of high school or having dropped out already with no job and no likelihood of getting one are doing what they have to do to support themselves and their families, and the upshot is, of course, that they go to prison. Even as early as 12, 13, 14 years old, they're now calling schools the poor quality of schools for poverty-stricken people, as well as schools where the attitudes are reflective of our default position of white supremacy in this country. We're watching 13 and 14-year-old boys in particular, but African-American children being routed straight out of schools and into prison. They're even calling it the pipeline to prison. This is not something that we're talking about from the 1940s or even the 1840s. It's 2010. We know that racial discrimination is still demonstrated throughout the employment arena, including the fact that the Supreme Court is now making decisions that actually undercut the civil rights of African Americans, and that the Civil Rights Division of the government has lost a lot of its lawyers who have quit because they're so disgusted by the fact that there's a 40% reduction in prosecution rates for having broken the civil rights of individual African Americans. The functional result of this is that we might as well mean to put African Americans even further behind than they've ever been before. The result is the same as if it was intentional, whether or not it is in fact intentional. If the hope has died, it's no wonder. It's just a logical response to reality. Not to mention the fact that we have in this country the most lethal part of the whole white supremacist system, which Steve Biko identified as internalized oppression. He said the mind of the oppressed is the strongest weapon the oppressor has in the struggle to maintain the oppressor's power. I hear students tell me, young African American men and women, but most particularly the men, maybe college isn't for me. How did they get here? Not clear whether or not college is for them. When I describe the okie-doke, how it has unfolded, what has occurred, the effects of it, people cry. They don't cry because they're disheartened. They cry because it's a relief to know that it's not personal, that it's not some failing of theirs, that they somehow cannot meet the standards that are expected. That in fact this is a setup that's supposed to put them in exactly that mindset. So even if the dream is alive, is the hope. If, as C. Wright Mills, sociologist, said, a power elite constitutes those who have the power to define in this country, then what are their best interests? What do they want to see happen? What works for them to maintain the power? They are served by African Americans who, for whatever reason, give up. Don't believe. Don't see who they really are. Not who their potential is to be, but who they really are right now. And if you don't step up, then you can be blamed. It's your own fault. We made the program, they didn't know. We offered the scholarship, they didn't apply. Maybe college isn't for